after this brief message.
It's Friday night, and we have to ask an important question. Do you know where your teenagers are? This could be the night your child ventures into a secretive and potentially dangerous world. The world of the rave.
The history of rave culture begins in the early summer of 1987, when two friends, Trevor Fung and Ian St. Paul, decide to open a small bar in San Antonio, Ibiza, called The Project. The Project was not the venue where this all began, however, for in Ibiza there were open-air clubs such as Amnesia, who had DJs like Alfredo playing some of the earliest house imports. In September of that summer, Trevor and Ian decide to invite their friend, Paul Oakenfold, to Ibiza for his birthday. Paul would bring with him Johnny Walker, Nicky Holloway and Danny Rampling, who would lay the foundations of the Ibiza Four, a group who have been widely accredited for the music revolution that would engulf British youth. While visiting Ibiza, Johnny, Paul, Nicky and Danny, under the influence of ecstasy, would experience DJ Alfredo, who played with the lyric style which fused funk, soul, dance and a few Chicago acid tracks. In the autumn of 1987, the Ibiza Four returned to London, but something had changed. What they had experienced in Ibiza would alter the course of their lives and music forever. Paul Oakenfold would open the original Project Club in London after hours. Once the club had officially finished at 2 AM, they would let the Ibiza Four in and party until the early hours of the morning, usually until 6 AM. Sadly, this would only last a few weeks until the police raided it. Paul Oakenfold would go on to start his own night named Future, where he began to shift music taste from hip-hop and rare groove to acid house and electronic dance music. Danny Rampling and his wife Jenny would also open a club of their own called Club Shoom, though it would later be shortened to Shoom, all the while being ignorant of just how much this club would change the face of UK nightlife forever. Shoom was based in a fitness centre in Southwark and was the pioneer in the acid house movement. For many, attending became a ritual as the club's openness towards drug use created an environment of acceptance that many had never experienced. In the January of 1988, Shoom would adopt the smiley face logo for its flyers, which would cement the smiley face as a symbol of the acid house movement. It cannot be understated just how revolutionary Shoom was for British culture in general. At a time when football violence was perpetually on the rise, these music scenes gave rival fans an opportunity to dance together in an ecstasy-induced euphoria and to spend just a few hours a night under the false illusion that the world would change. Paul Stone and Lou Vukovic would start R.I.P. around this time, where they provided a harder-edged party located in a warehouse complex on Clink Street, once home to Britain's very first prison. R.I.P. would see the likes of Mr. C, Eddie Richards and Kid Bachelor play a harder, more underground version of house, as opposed to the pop songs that Shoom, according to Mr. C. R.I.P. would play to a very diverse crowd, often seeing gangsters raving side by side with people in shell suits. During a time where everyone was a part of something, whether that be a football team, a gang, or something else, raves gave people the opportunity to leave violence as a tool of the past and find a community forged through the love of music and partying. Underground raves such as the Rave at the Cave and Trip City and Labyrinth also played a part in the acid house explosion. Sadly, it would not take long for the mainstream clubs to start picking up the sounds and gathering their own followers, moving further and further away from Rampling's vision of collective love and experience as the mainstream club's owners transformed it into a way to begin to market and profit of these events, and eventually put an end to the second summer of love itself. With the commercialisation of the acid house movement, the British public were finally introduced to smiley culture, and suddenly this corporate cash-in began. Mass-produced smiley and Where's the Acid House Party t-shirts begun to appear everywhere, as well as frowny face tops to cash in on the anti-drugs crowd. On August 17th, The Sun publishes an investigation into the Heaven nightclub, which was then owned by Richard Branson. The Sun claimed junkies flaunt their craving by wearing t-shirts sold at the club bearing messages such as "Can you feel it?" and "Drop acid, not bombs." Whilst you would expect an article such as this to be detrimental to business, Paul, following Richard Branson's advice, merely closed the club for 2 weeks before reopening as the Land of Oz. To continue on this trend of bad publicity for the movement, the tragic ecstasy-related death of Janet Mays at an illegal acid party sparks a nationwide police crackdown on warehouse parties. During one such raid at a party in Sevenoaks, 20-year-old student Paul Harnell was beaten by uniformed police officers. Consistent incidents like these, and obviously the use of illegal substances, would help cement the anti-police ideals that still run through the scene to this day. In a continued attempt by the British government to crush rave culture, Robert Darby and Leslie Thomas are charged with conspiring to manage premises where drugs were supplied after organising a boat party on the Thames. They are sentenced to 10 and 6 years imprisonment respectively. Sunrise would sell 4,000 tickets for their Guy Fawkes edition party. As the event begins in a derelict gasworks, riot police would raid it in an attempt to shut down the music. By 5 AM, the police are forced to withdraw, hopelessly outnumbered by people who climbed barbed wire fences and ran across dual carriageways to get in. This showed that those in the rave culture that with enough mass and solidarity, the rave would not end until they decided it did. This would be a vital lesson for the organisers, as increased police presence made it harder and harder to continue the free parties. In the end, the organisers learnt they didn't need the police to not know about the event, merely more mass of people to be at the event itself to make an immovable object. The next day, our free and unbiased media reported Sunrise's party as an evil night of ecstasy, in a ploy to turn public opinion against these parties through falsified moral panic, just as they had done with the modders before them. In 1989, the scene begins to evolve again once more, as the parties move from inner city clubs and warehouses to the countryside where police presence would be minimalised. This would see some of the largest illegal parties in Britain attended by sometimes tens of thousands of people cladded out in baggy tops, smileys, bandanas and kickers. Around this time, acid house would become a phrase reserved for the newspapers as the parties themselves began to be called raves. In June, Sunrise's Midsummer Night's Dream is attended by over 11,000 people. The Sun newspaper quickly runs the headline Spaced Out, with many other claims involving youngsters so drugged up they ripped the heads off pigeons, and at the end of the night the floor was covered in empty ecstasy wrappers. Unsurprisingly, both claims were untrue, with the empty wrappers merely being pieces of silver foil that fell from the ceiling and dead pigeons nowhere to be seen. By the 22nd of July 1989, these parties had gotten so large that it began to cause national panic, with tabloid reports of over 20,000 at one Sunrise event and convoys of crazed teenagers tearing up the motorways. Chief Superintendent Ken Tapperden sets up the police's pay party unit who gather information about organisers. In October of that same year, Tory MP Graham Bright pushes the Entertainment's Increased Penalties Act through Parliament and the police's pay party unit begins to hunt down the organisers. In January 1990, the Freedom to Party campaigns began to march in London against the Increased Penalties Bill. 8,000 people gathered in Trafalgar Square to hear the speeches from the main promoters and DJs. Later that night, a warehouse in Radlett is cracked by the Weekend World, who joined forces with Sunrise, Genesis and Biology for a free party organised in just a few hours. Police roadblocked with convoys, resulting in many skirmishes between ravers and police, resulting in the actual rave continuing until 9 AM. In July, the Increased Penalties Bill is passed, meaning the penalty for organising an illegal event was raised to a £20,000 fine and 6 months imprisonment. By 1991, the threats of illegal raves began to dwindle as licensed legal raves took over. Whilst it's not uncommon to go to a free party today, they are often dwarfed in size and budget by the free parties of the past. Legal raves have instead taken place. However, this does not mean rave culture is dead like some think. The history of raves itself proves that they have adapted over time to adversity and will continue to do so. Where did you grow up and what city were you regularly going out
So
to?
I grew up in South Manchester, and I think regularly cities that we were going out in was Manchester and I would say Liverpool, maybe the main two.
What period of time was this?
1994 or 5, probably. I mean, yeah, from about 1994, 1995 onwards.
Did you travel to other places to go raving?
Yes.
Where did you go?
So I would say apart from Manchester, Liverpool, we travelled to Stoke, Leicester, Birmingham, Sheffield. So we tended to I would say probably like Birmingham and above, Derby, never really to the south.
What did the average night entail?
It would usually start quite early.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that they started quite early. There was usually, I think people would now have pre-drinks. Maybe there was not pre-drinks at that point. There might have been pre-drinks. drugs. Yeah, we would probably get together pretty early. I think there was all this thing about, like, which is still relevant today, getting ready, doing the whole pre-thing. We would go out early-ish, and I think that we would tend to start in a pub, bar, whatever was near to the venue, a pub or a bar, wherever was nearer to the venue, and then probably straight in from maybe not early doors, but not far off, like opening.
Did you find yourself involved in the drug culture?
Yes. Yes.
Was it easy to find?
Yes. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Although somebody when you did get arrested, but yes, yes.
How do you think drug culture has changed on the scene?
I think it's different drugs. I think the culture has definitely changed, but it's different drugs.
Was the rave scene an accepting atmosphere?
Yes.
Do you miss the culture of how it used to be?
Yeah.
What would you say is the major difference from then to now?
Mobile phones.
Yeah.
Is the biggest, definitely. And I think that there's probably awareness, like people are more aware of where they are and what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they are more aware of showing other people of where they are and what they're doing, when actually there is less immersion in what is happening.
Yeah.
And I think that, so obviously we had no phones, or there was no ability to capture video or anything like that. And there was a difference between like just the DJs themselves, like DJs now. I mean, there were celebrities then, but it's like different levels of celebrity now.
Yeah.
And you could go into a club, and the DJ would literally be stood next to you.
Yeah.
Whereas now, they tend to be on a stage on a raised platform. Like they're not. You're quite disengaged, and clubs have just got bigger. And I think that's some of it where it's definitely changed. And also, I don't know, there was always an excitement of like DJs arriving in a venue or wherever you were, because there would be a changeover, and you'd see them arrive, you'd know that their set was about to happen. So I think it's changed a lot. I think there's still places that have that kind of magic, but I would say that they're harder to find.
As an ex-raver, how is your lifestyle now you're in your late 40s?
I've not stopped.
Oh, you're not?
Not stopped. I mean, it's a lot less.
Yeah.
It's a lot less. I have no responsibilities. I've got no kids.
Yeah.
So I think my lifestyle is quite different than I would say, not saying most, but I think I would say their lifestyle's quite different. It's not as often.
Yeah.
Nowhere near as often. But I don't think I've ever really, I would say that I've ever really given, completely X.
Fair
I would
enough.
just say I'm semi-retired.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.